My gosh, what a beautiful day. I came here via a few other places, but I was in Minneapolis last night. And I almost had a shock when I checked the temperature. It was 32 degrees there. So it made me real happy. I didn't check what the temperature was here, but it felt so good landing and getting in the car and driving here. Obviously, it is a beautiful time of year. But most of all, I just felt very much at home. For those of you, I see some Tulsi shirts, I see some familiar faces in the crowd. We spent a lot of time here in 2020. My husband, my sister, some friends who were all helping on our campaign. And the reason why we felt like this was a home away from home was because of all of you and because of the spirit of New Hampshire. So good to be back. And for the same reason that all of you are gathered here. Freedom is a word that is being thrown around quite a bit these days. But I have not seen in my lifetime a point where our fundamental freedoms are more under attack than they are right now. The stakes could not be higher in this election. There is so much that has happened over the last couple years, so much that has happened. Too much for me to talk about it. I know Don's going to talk about it. But if you saw the announcement that I made a few days ago about why I can no longer call myself a Democrat, I went into detail on a number of those reasons. But really what they all boil down to is the fact that the party that's in power in Washington today is a party that is controlled by so-called woke fanatical ideologues who not only don't take their oath to support and defend the Constitution seriously, it's worse than that. They have taken it and thrown it in the trash. And it's even worse than that, because their policies and their actions are actively seeking to undermine those fundamental freedoms. I never would have imagined that in my life we would be at a point where something as fundamental as freedom of speech, I really wonder if it'll be there when these kids grow up. Who would have thought that we live in a time in this country where people are actively having to self-censor, whether it's at school or at work or at family functions, because of fear of what the backlash might be, for fear of losing your job, for fear of being blacklisted or barred or censored on social media. Who would have thought that we would live in a time where the President of the United States and his administration would form the 2020 decade era of the Ministry of Truth? That they would have the audacity to say, you know what, under the Department of Homeland Security, there's a red flag, first of all. Under the Department of Homeland Security, we are going to have a disinformation governance board, second red flag, in which those in power get to determine what is information and what is disinformation. And the person that they wanted to have in charge of that, let's not even talk about the TikTok video, please, because it makes me sick every time I think about it. A supposed expert in disinformation was responsible for spreading falsehoods and lies. To live in a time where we have people who believe truly in their heart of hearts that it is okay to twist and turn and change what they believe is the truth for their own political ends is a very dangerous thing. Because this mindset of, you know what, the ends justify the means, and in their mind, them staying in power is the end. The end is not supporting freedom and upholding the Constitution. The end is their political power, because they are the only ones who know what's best for us, better than we do ourselves. They're the only ones who can tell us, here's what you should think, here's what you should say, here's how you should act, here's how you should relate to each other, here's what you must call each other, and if you do not comply, they carry the force of the law behind them to force that compliance. Again, the things that I'm saying are things that even just a few years ago, I would have laughed if somebody told me that. But this is not some exaggeration. This is the country that we're living in today. And so that version of the ministry of truth, they tried to stand up, it got shut down pretty quickly because why? We all said, hold on, this is not acceptable. And they bowed to the pressure of public pressure. And at that time I said, okay, fine, they've put that on pause, but we can't be complacent because we know that they will bring it back up under another name with another face at the forefront of it, and that is exactly what they did within, I think, 2 months. A very short period of time, thinking, you know what, the American people are not paying attention, they're too stupid to watch what's going on and understand what we're doing, so they came up with a different version of it, and this time put Vice President Kamala Harris in charge of it. I guess I don't need to say anymore. But the point here is that in all different directions, they're tearing up the Constitution and attacking our fundamental freedoms. You don't hear any other leading Democrats, and I've looked, who are standing up and saying, this is not right. It's not right to say that we will only support and protect the speech that we agree with. It's not right that the ACLU has changed their own rules from being stalwart champions of free speech decades ago, even when that speech was the most horrifying, terrible speech that most people found atrocious, to now being an organization that says, well, we will protect the speech that we find is aligned with our values, whatever those values may be. We are lacking leadership in Washington in so many ways, and in both parties. We have this powerful cabal of the permanent Washington that are more interested in themselves and gaining more power than they are about actually doing what's best for the American people, than doing what's best in the interest of our country. So that puts the onus on us. That puts the onus on we the people. Because we don't have some shining knight on a white horse coming in to save the day. This puts the onus on us to go back to our roots and really bring to the forefront the vision that our founders had for us, of we the people, of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We've lost it. And those in power are abusing their power. Where right now, as we sit here, President Biden continues to push us closer and closer to the brink of nuclear war. This is the existential threat that we face. I didn't grow up in the duck and cover era. Maybe some of you did. Remember having to do those drills in school? We've gotten to a place where people in the news and politicians are talking in such a cavalier way about the use of nuclear weapons, as though a nuclear war is one that can be fought and won. Everywhere I go, I'm urging people, look back to President Reagan, when he said a nuclear war cannot be won and therefore must never be fought. Look back to President Kennedy, who spoke, who exercised that leadership during the Cuban Missile Crisis, walked us back from the brink, and talked very clearly and strongly about how pursuing this path of conflict between nuclear powers can only lead to one place, and that is a collective death wish. There's so many challenges and issues that we face, and we have to continue to fight those battles. But we also have to recognize that we're in a place where next month we may not be able to have those conversations. I spoke with a gentleman last night at the event that I was speaking at, and I was advocating for leadership that can bring a negotiated, peaceful end to this war, to walk us all, yes, the American people, but the world back from the brink. And he said, Tulsi, that's up to Putin. We've heard the same thing from President Biden. Anybody asks him who says, what's the end game? What's the outcome? What's the objective here? When does this end? When do we stop sending billions of our dollars to go and fund this proxy war with Russia? What is President Biden's response every time? Well, that's up to Putin. General Bolduc, is that leadership?
No.
That's a dereliction of leadership. To have the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States military, saying that a war that we are funding and very much involved with, its outcome is dependent on a leader of another country, that makes me angry. And it makes me angry because of where we're going. And so this gentleman that I was speaking with last night, he said there should be no compromise whatsoever. And I asked him, at what point in our history has there ever been a peaceful negotiated treaty to end a war where one side walked away with everything that they wanted? You're either going to put the interest of the American people and peace and the world at the forefront, or you will be the reason for our doom. The challenges that we face are great, both here at home and around the world. We need strong leaders in Washington to stand up to this permanent Washington establishment, funded and pay their allegiance to the military-industrial complex, to big pharma, to big corporations, without care for how it impacts us in our everyday lives, who refuse to be accountable to their voters as your senator refuses to be. We need leaders who know their purpose. And that's what I know about Don Bolduc. He has dedicated his life in service to our country, willing to give his life in that service. The sacrifice. There's a certain kind of clarity that comes with that experience. And I've seen it myself with many that I have served with. I've seen it with those who are serving in Washington now, where even those who go with the best of intentions are very quickly swallowed up by the black hole of all that is wrong with Washington. Where rather than understanding, like, hey, here's the people who voted for me are the people that I work for. They are the reason why I have this job. Very quickly their allegiances start to shift because, well, again, the end justifies the means. They go, well, if I just compromise on this and this and this and this and this and this, then one day I'll be able to do all the things that I said I would do. Well, you know, I really care about being popular or cool with the in crowd in Washington, so maybe I'm just going to make these compromises so that they approve of what I'm doing. And this is Washington. It is like high school. And the cliques that are there are the mainstream media, who don't do their job as journalists to ask the tough questions and get answers to the American people because they don't want to be unpopular in their crew. You've got the professional political class, and then you've got the politicians, and they all like to hang out with each other after dinner and scratch each other's backs and say how awesome each other are. But meanwhile, what's happening in the country? We are paying higher and higher gas prices. Inflation is making the little amount of money that people are making worth even less, and making it more and more difficult just to survive. And so every time you hear things like the Inflation Reduction Act that does nothing to reduce inflation, but it is an outright lie, that's a slap in the face to all of you, to the American people. We need leaders who know their purpose. Don Bolduc has literally stared death in the face.
Yep.
I have no doubt in my mind that if you choose to send him to Washington, he will stare down anyone who dares to threaten our Constitution. He will stare down anyone who has the audacity to say, hey, Don, if you don't vote the way we vote, then, we're not going to invite you on our yacht. I think Don might have some choice words that I won't say in a mixed crowd for anyone who tries to do that. We need leaders who are committed to service, committed to serving you, the American people, committed to serving the best interests of our country, committed to upholding our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and not willing to back down. It's my pleasure to support and introduce my friend General Don
Croc TV.